America had 3 early colonies. All of these colonies struggled at first. 2 were successful and 1 was not. The colonies we will be talking about are Roanoke Island, Jamestown, and Plymouth. Colonization happens when a group of people from one country start a settlement in another country. For example, people in England left their country to settle in America. Many people left England in search of a new place where they could practice their religion free from persecution. The people who arrived in America did not want to be ruled by a king and wanted to begin a new life in a new land. Roanoke Island is located off the banks of North Carolina and was the first English colony. In 1587, 117 English men, women, and children arrived, led by John White, to settle on the island. Originally, the group planned to go to Chesapeake Bay but had to land on Roanoke Island due to hurricane season. John White was accompanied by his daughter, Eleanor Dare. Within 3 months of arriving, Eleanor gave birth to the first English child born in America. Her name was Virginia Dare. In late 1587, the food supply on the island began to dwindle. The settlers were concerned that they would not survive the winter and urged John White to sail back to England to get more supplies. His journey should have lasted only 3 months. However, England was at war with Spain, and all ships were taken to be used in the war, including John White's ship. When he finally returned to Roanoke Island in 1590, the colony was abandoned and all colonists were gone. The only clue to this mysterious disappearance was the word Croatoan carved into a piece of wood that had been a part of the settlement. No one knows for sure what happened to the settlers. What is strange is that no bones were found except for one skull. One theory is that the settlers were killed by hostile Native Americans. Another theory is that the settlers were killed by a storm and swept out to sea. Regardless of the reason, it is clear that the colonization of Roanoke Island had failed. In December of 1606, 104 settlers sailed from London to settle in Virginia. The expedition was funded by the Virginia Company with the intention of finding gold and seeking a water route to the Orient. In May of 1607, explorers landed on Jamestown Island to start a colony on the banks of the James River. This settlement was called Jamestown. The people who arrived in Jamestown were not farmers and had no experience growing crops. The natives initially welcomed and helped to support the colonists with food and supplies. However, the relationship with the natives soured, and the settlers were left on their own. Many people died in Jamestown due to disease and starvation, with over 80% of the colonists perishing between 1609 and 1610, which was called the Starving Time. By 1614, the new colony was in trouble. John Rolfe, one of the settlers in Jamestown, had learned to smoke in London and brought a tobacco seed with him. He planted the tobacco seed and it flourished where other crops had failed. The Virginia Company sold the tobacco back to England, and due to the dramatic success of the tobacco crop, more settlers came to Jamestown. The settlers soon realized that tobacco was a successful cash crop, and if they planted more tobacco, then their colony would prosper as it never had before. Jamestown had exported more than 10 tons of tobacco by 1619, and the settlers were no longer in danger of starvation. The colony's chief export was now tobacco. The colonists had discovered tobacco rather than gold or a route to the Orient, and had transformed Jamestown from a potential failure to an amazing success. Because the settlers planted more and more tobacco, they had a need for more labor than was available at Jamestown. As a result, both Englishmen and Africans were brought to the colony. Unfortunately, the Africans that came to Jamestown were indentured servants. However, after 4 to 7 years of slavery, The servants were given their freedom, as well as a small area of land to build a home. In September of 1620, a merchant ship left a port in England called Plymouth. The ship was called the Mayflower and had 102 people aboard rather than the cargo that typically was found on a merchant ship. All of the people on the ship were hoping to start a new life and a new church in America. The Mayflower finally made it to the New World, but for the first couple of months, the people had to live on the ship while houses were being built. The colony was established where the modern town of Plymouth, Massachusetts is today. More than half of the colonists died during the first winter at Plymouth due to starvation, disease, and harsh weather. Without the help of the natives, all of the colonists would have surely died. The settlers built what was called a common house during the first winter at Plymouth. A number of other structures followed and were built on a flat area called Cole's Hill. In addition, a wooden platform was constructed to hold a cannon, which would be used to defend the colony. In March of 1621, the settlers met the natives for the first time. A native named Samoset walked into the middle of the settlement and proclaimed, "Welcome, Englishmen!" He had apparently learned English from English fishermen and trappers. Samoset taught the colonists to hunt, fish, and grow crops such as beans, squash, and corn. For example, he told the settlers to plant fish heads with crop seeds. The following summer, the colonists celebrated what has now become known as Thanksgiving when they harvested their first successful crop. The English government looked to America as a source of raw materials and a market to sell their goods. The government also considered America as a base to launch attacks against the Spanish, as well as a place to send the poor people of England.